Back again, being consistent. I ain't even gonna say much. Let's just get into this shit. But shout out to you if you're watching this, whoever watching this. I don't care where you from, I don't care where you at, I don't care what you doing, I don't care if you're on the moon, I don't care if you're in school, I don't care if you're at home, I don't care if you're at work. Shout out to you. For me. But we're gonna get into this part 2 of Lil Durk's lawyer doing an interview, I guess. For me. Alright, we good money, man. Let's get into this shit. Burn this shit. Alright, bet.
Well, what's interesting about this case right now is that part of the evidence that the feds used to indict Lil Durk was an
free schmirk. You know that. What he was putting on for the trenches, man.
A song by Durk and Babyface Ray called Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy. Now, on that song, when you listen to it on YouTube, there's these screams that are played throughout the song. And those screams sound very similar to Quando Rondo screaming when he found out that his cousin was killed. And it was in a piece of like news footage. But there's an interesting point about that version of the song. So explain it to me.
Yeah, so let me kind of correct you for 1 second, okay? And that is that there's the song in which Durk was just doing a feature. Mm-hmm. And in that song, there's no screams at all, okay? And so that is in the indictment. So there was an indictment that did not include Durk, right? It did include an unindicted co-conspirator, which later the government says is him, but it didn't include him. When they did supersede the indictment, it was the exact same indictment. Everything was the same, except paragraph 6 put in the song you're talking about. However, there was no screams in it. What the government said is, look at these lyrics. These lyrics seem to be, they don't seem to be, they are celebrating and ultimately monetizing this incident, to which we responded. And I have to tell you, Vlad, we immediately started hearing from not only people that are connected to Durk, but like executives in the music industry. People were just reaching out to us, go, you know, the government's wrong, right? You do know that music, you don't go to a studio on a Saturday and produce a song on Monday. And then we started doing our homework, interviewing the producers, and found out that that song and the Durk part of it was done 7 months beforehand. So unless he had ESP, it had nothing to do with this song. Now, what you're talking about is the other element. So we're at the hearing and we bring it up, and the government says something about what you're talking about, that there's these YouTube things. And so I write a letter to, and it's in our motion that we filed. I do the responsible thing, very courteous. I send an email saying, hey, you all mentioned this. Can you let us know? And we got some of these things, a couple of these things that you're talking about. And so what those are fan edits. Those are just people that are in their basements, in their garages, that do this every day of the week. They have absolutely nothing to do with Babyface. They have nothing to do with Durk. They have nothing to do with any of the transactional corporations that are involved in the production of this music. These are just people doing stuff on the side and has nothing to do with Durk.
Well, in response to the actual situation, Durk's family put out a statement recently. They said the recent developments in Durk's legal case have brought a harsh truth to light. The government presented false evidence to a grand jury to indict him. That isn't justice. That's a violation of the very system that's supposed to protect all of us. Durk has always used music to tell stories, to express pain, to heal, and yet those same lyrics are now being used against him. We refuse to stay silent as Black artists continue to be criminalized for their creativity. Rap is art. As a family, we are asking the public and the culture to stand with us, to stand for the truth, stand for fairness, stand for the voice. The Banks family.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
Yes, sir.
that has obviously nothing to do with us. That's clearly a visceral reaction by his family, because it seems to be kind of systemic now in these cases where lyrics come to the forefront. And it just sounds to me the obvious that his family's responding to when everything's distilled. The bottom line is we're fighting over lyrics. And that's their reaction. And they're certainly entitled to express their frustration and even their anger at the process. But I do think that they express something that everybody in this industry is dealing with. And you and I know the cases that I've done where lyrics become an issue, and it leaves me scratching my head. I mean, you know, we did YFN's case, and they're introducing these lyrics and giving us evidence of lyrics that to me meant zero. The folks in YSL had to deal with it. And it really is an intrusive part of dealing with the First Amendment. And I'm sensitive to that issue because I don't know of another art form, and you have your finger on the pulse of rap as good as anybody in the world right now. And I guarantee you that Vlad cannot tell me another musical genre in which the government plays the game. If you have kids, and I know you do, Where's Waldo, right? Where they sit and look through not hundreds, not thousands, but probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of verses, and tries to find something that they think in their prosecutor's office or their law enforcement offices is somehow connected possibly to a crime. That's disconcerting to people that care about this musical genre.
Well, you represented Boosie before.
Yes.
Was it his murder case you represented him for?
No, my friend Jason Williams, that case, who's now the district attorney of Orleans Parish. Go figure that out.
Because I remember Boosie said that for like 2 days they played his lyrics in court. And ultimately, it was all nonsense. And he was found not guilty. He was on death row.
Boosie was, let me tell you, Boosie hired Jason Williams, this amazing lawyer that's the DA there, and I hope one day becomes a U.S. senator, and who knows where he'll go. He's fabulous. And Jason did an amazing job and tore that issue to shreds. And I would imagine that the Orleans Parish, that is New Orleans, under his leadership, is not picking apart music to prosecute young artists in New Orleans these days.
Well, in 2022, California passed the Decriminalizing Artistic Expression Act, which basically limits the ability of rap lyrics to be used as evidence in criminal cases. That's in California. This is a federal case. I mean, he was arrested in California, but ultimately, I mean, he's in California, right?
Yeah.
You know, where he's actually awaiting trial, but this is a federal case. So therefore, this law does not affect the federal system.
Yeah. You know, so I'm glad you brought that up. And I know there was a movement in New York, and a U.S. congressman and I had lunch talking to me about my thoughts about 2 years ago about where this would go federally. I know there was an attempt by some congressmen to do the same thing in federal cases. I don't think it's got the steam that it needs to, but it feels good to know there's some people in DC that are saying, you know what, do we really need to do this? So there are people talking about this issue. California's a great example. And I believe that legislation was post George Floyd, when a lot of good criminal justice legislation came about.
Yeah, look, this goes back into the early 90s. I interviewed a rapper named X-Rated who was charged with like a home invasion murder. He was a gang member in Sacramento. And ultimately they used some of the lyrics from his album to indict him, as well as his album cover had a picture of him with a gun to his head. And they're saying, oh, this is the same type of pistol that was used in the murder and so forth. Regardless of what happened, he got like 30 years in prison. He's out now. But, you know, when we broke down to it, he was like, these are just general gangster rap lyrics. It has nothing to do with what happened. But it's interesting how law enforcement will really piece together, you know what I'm saying, like after the fact, and say, okay, well, this is clearly that, because it sounds like that. But like I said, in this case, it was recorded before it even happened.
Yeah, so let's be realistic. You know, I try to be a student of these cases, and I know you are as well. We need to distinguish between some organization of 6 people doing home invasions and create a faux label and have one guy that goes to the studio 2 times a year and has 212 Instagram followers and tries to pretend they're a label. That's totally different than people going in the studio that are professionals, that are in there sometimes 20-hour days and you know, and doing and if I say it wrong, somebody help me. I think it's like what the punch list method.
Punch in, punch out.
Punch in, punch out. Which, you know, here I am. I'm a lawyer, and I'm literally studying this. And at my office, because of the cases we have, we laugh all the time. Punch in, punch out. I listen to it sometimes. The attorneys, I'll hear them in their offices walking to get coffee. They're listening to somebody say the same 3 words for 2 hours straight. You understand it.
Yeah.
But here's my frustration, Vlad. If Vlad understands it, to get ready for an interview and to understand and to prepare for an interview of Boosie or Durk or Baby, then why doesn't law enforcement spend time to understand that no one's sitting there writing this little line, okay, and then running in front of a microphone and doing it, but sometimes they'll say the same 3 words for hours on end and then match it up with different times they'll say those words and you know, match up the intonation and all that. I mean, I've made myself learn, and I cannot believe that at this point in my career that I'm trying to understand this, but it frustrates me that prosecutors in different cases around the country aren't doing the same thing. And so let me give you, Vlad, my example. You know, we talk about going to a grand jury. I don't think that any prosecutor in the history of this country has attempted to put in front of a grand jury DNA evidence without having a DNA report come back by a recognized DNA expert. I don't think any prosecutor in the history of this country has done the same thing with toxicology or seriology. But yet, we'll put a cop on the stand. Something as important as this, when someone is looking at spending the rest of their life in jail, and just say, yeah, this is where this music comes from, and this is when it was done. And I just don't think we should take things like that lightly when we're talking about impacting people's freedom for the rest of their lives.
That. Yeah. I'm off this shit. One more shout out to anybody who gonna see this. Okay, where you at? What you doing? Okay, where you from? Shout out to you though. Respectfully. I'm out of here though. Gra, gra.